Many new and exciting changes to our Carolina Catholic apostolate, built to communicate how to better learn, love, and live our Catholic faith. We begin with our name change to Carolina Catholic Media. This reflects the expanded scope of Carolina Catholic Radio to include the development of our podcast, streaming, social media, YouTube, and direct marketing platforms. 2022 is a very important year for the Catholic Church. As a result, Carolina Catholic Media will feature more local news, information, and conversation to reflect what's happening now and how it impacts our local Catholic community. Throughout the year, Carolina Catholic Media will showcase our Catholic schools and homeschools, the Charlotte Diocese 50th anniversary, and the 2-year worldwide synod process that begins on the diocesan level. We encourage you to get involved, join us, and catch the spirit. The Carolina Catholic Media Apostolate is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are 100% funded by you. Please consider a donation, monthly tithe, or business sponsorship to support our mission and vision to spread the truth of Jesus Christ and our Catholic faith across the Carolinas. Thank you for discerning a role in our apostolate. May God bless you abundantly.
The Carolina Catholic Media Network presents From the Rooftop with Monsignor Patrick Winslow, Vicar General for the Diocese of Charlotte, and Father Matthew Kauth, Rector of St. Joseph College Seminary, as they look out on the world from the rooftop of the church, in a conversation about both current and more lasting affairs. Now, here is Monsignor Winslow and Father Kauth.
So most people probably don't realize that during the course of a given week, I think about things and put them in the back of my head and say, I got to talk to Father Kauth about that. Do you do the same thing?
I do, especially now that we're doing these podcasts, because I think to myself, I'm going to have an opportunity to discuss something. But unfortunately, my card catalog, the back of my head, has massive holes in the bottom of it. So I put a card in there and it falls right into the floor somewhere. It's hard to remember the things I want to talk about.
Well, I can barely remember one thing to the next. But, the reality is, the types of things that make it into my little card catalog for you, they're not trivial. They really aren't. They're meaningful. They're substantial. It may seem like it was triggered by a trivial thought or a trivial consideration, but the reality is there's a lot there to unpack. And so, one of the things I think that we try to do in our conversations is to bring that light of faith and what we know by virtue of our faith, as well as philosophical underpinnings, and apply them and to do it in such a way that we learn more. And we gain more. So for me, I want to check in with you because I'm seeing something or I don't understand something, and I know that you have the philosophical and theological underpinnings. I know that I have a certain philosophical, theological underpinnings that we can draw upon and to see, with a greater light. So although sometimes it may seem like we're talking about what others may refer to as trivialities, the reality is, we are trying to learn from everyday experience, from the things right in front of us, and not merely the abstract.
Right. Look at life and begin to comment on it, subsurface, as it were. And the fact is almost everything that's worth looking at, and most things in the world, of course, are worth, therefore, considering. It's interesting that the word speculative life, right, or contemplative life, that word speculative means to see something as in a mirror. Because when St. Paul says, of course, that in the future we're going to see God as he is, right now we see him as it were in a mirror. And that kind of shadowy reflection, the way in which, of course, ancient mirrors weren't as perfect as the ones we have now are. And you don't see things as clearly as you would with the naked eye. And so part of our attempts and tasks here with you is to look at something acutely.
And to learn.
And to learn.
And to learn from it. And I know that it's, for the average rank and file person, it can be difficult, right? You have a lot of tasks, you have a lot of obligations, whether you have employment or whether you're working at home directly with your family and your children. There's a thousand things on your mind to take care of. But we do have time to think.
Absolutely. And this is part of the difficulty of the unexamined life, as Socrates would say, right? That most of the knowledge that we attempt to gain and to glean has to do with doing things or making things, right? What St. Thomas would call it the arts, as opposed to that's practical intellect, as opposed to the speculative. That we do have time to think. And it's the best part of us, in the sense that to take something in from the outside world and begin to turn it around, to consider it, etc. So that's what we're trying to do.
It's the only way you can evolve.
Yeah.
It really is the only way you can evolve in your own formation, your own education, your own understanding. And so all right, I'll tell you one of those little cards I put in the back of my mind recently, which is derived from a few experiences I've had recently, mainly encountering unpleasant people. Or people who were caught in an unpleasant mood, and I had to interact with them.
Unpleasant people.
So I don't want to. All right, I'm going to say unpleasant people as a shorthand because it's just easier to say.
Right.
I recognize that they are not ontologically unpleasant people. They are not on their level of their being unpleasant. It's a bad moment they were in.
Right.
It's transient. I get that. I know for a fact I can be unpleasant too. So I'm just going to say unpleasant people, understanding the fact that it's like weather, right? It moves through all of us. But there seem to be some people who like that weather. They live in the cloud of unpleasantness, and when you interact with them, your sunny day just got a dose of rain, and so I've been conscientious of it in large part. It's a bit of a confession. I had an interaction with someone where I was tired and just kind of off my game, and this individual received me with a great deal of unpleasantness, and I thought disrespect. And my reaction immediately, reflexively, was to match her. Was to reply in kind. And I found myself going from 0 to 60 in tension and contending with this person by engaging them in the way that she had engaged me, and it just kind of escalated. And it's not a proud moment. In fact, I went back and apologized because my conscience bothered me. But that said, as I reflected upon it, what happened there? And I was sucked in to the unpleasantness. I was not rooted in my own disposition. I was kind of off guard. And the moment I encountered her orbit, it was like I was pulled into her vacuum of unpleasantness. And it was really difficult to escape. So, I know, as a moral theologian and all sorts of things, you probably have 100 things you can say on the matter. But just on the superficial level, it matters to me that people try to engage respectfully and pleasantly. That does not mean you can't be an inherent pessimist. It does not mean that you have to be a bubbly, sanguine personality. It just means you need to be respectful of another person.
It used to be called just being polite, right?
Right.
Or as they say, Italians have a great way of saying that someone is disagreeable that they're maleducato, right? That they're literally poorly educated. Because
there's in Spanish.
That's true, yes.
Like bad manners.
Because there's something about the interactions we have with human persons that demand the same kind of respect that we would show to our friends. And so we can't be friends with everyone, right? Obviously, very few friends in the course of a lifetime. Any meaningful friendships, even though you have all sorts of pleasurable and useful friendships, etc. But the way in which one gets trained to treat the person that you meet at the grocery store, at the post office, or anywhere else for that matter, is extending to them the kind of way in which you would treat one with whom you are friends. The person that I always think of, and I have the most interesting sort of success with in this level, is traveling. There's no one that receives more as it were, cloud of unpleasantness than the person who works at the ticket office.
Delivering bad news a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone hates them.
Right.
Because they're stressed out. Everyone walks. If you've ever watched people at an airport, they walk really quickly as if everyone's going to be late. As if the entire system of airplane travel is up for grabs all of a sudden. And so people are tense in those sorts of situations. And the poor person who has absolutely no control over the airline is just sitting there taking your bags, is the person that receives massive clouds of unpleasantness all the time. And the reason I bring it up is because your statement made me realize that how many times I've approached that ticket counter with perhaps a bit of anxiety or demands or things of that nature that I wanted to get across. And every time I've checked myself and tried to break through what they have incubated by virtue of everyone else's difficult situation, that by noon they're all upset too. Because they've entered into that cloud, as you put it, and to try to bring a little bit of sunshine to there, it's amazing when they finally break. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're not going to treat me poorly.
Yeah.
You're not going to make my life even more miserable, even though I have no idea who you are.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the traveling, because recently I traveled, and I was thinking about this. That other incident happened before I traveled, and it kind of got under, I'm saying under my skin, but it got in my mind, like, how do I avoid that again, right? I don't want to do that again, even should somebody foist a dark cloud in my direction. I don't want to engage. So I've developed a principle, actually two. One, underreact. So as a way forward, I'm going to choose an underreaction rather than an overreaction, which will, I think, incline me toward being a bit more dignified and generous, because I don't want to match the energy that's being thrown at me.
Right. Which is the temptation.
So for me, when I say underreact, I mean underreact to the negative energy that's coming at me. Go underneath it. Don't try to equal it, and certainly don't try to pounce back harder. And then the other is, I have concluded after 50-some years of life that I generally don't like people who don't try to be pleasant. I mean, I don't know how else to say that, but to me, it's a sign of respecting the inherent dignity of another person, and people can be pulled, they can feel justified by being unpleasant or in their unpleasantness. They can think, well, because so and so is wrong, then therefore I can be decidedly unpleasant. That it's somehow a due response, and I sometimes I find this. I mean, no offense, because I know you belong to this community of cholerics.
I do.
I can find among cholerics that they.
I was just going to admit it, but now you're calling me out.
Well,
you're being very unpleasant.
Well, no, I said it very pleasantly, actually. The listeners will know how politely I said that. So for those who don't know about choleric, the tendencies or the temperaments, I mean, do you want to offer a brief explanation?
The medievals believed that there were 4 different kinds of temperaments, and they were based upon different kind of humors in the blood. And whereas they might be incorrect or inaccurate relative to the cause of it, they are quite accurate relative to the kinds of persons that there are. Most people fall into a predominant temperament and then sort of a secondary temperament. And so the names for them were relative to the humors in the blood, as I mentioned. So a sanguine person is someone, as Father said, is very bubbly and optimistic and kind of the life of the party, but not always a deep
gregarious
thinker.
Often.
We would call them now a bit more of an extrovert. Like they can recharge by being with people, etc. And you need all these kinds of people around. Each temperament has its own good and its own difficulty. So the sanguine, there is the phlegmatic, which that slow-moving river, that languid river. They never get too worked up about anything and are not usually the persons that give you initiative, but they're also the persons that can roll with the punches. The melancholic, which literally means sort of black bile, is the person who can, oftentimes a very deep thinker, but can be corrosive in their thinking because they brood on things. They think about situations that happen to them externally, and they take it inside and don't react. Whereas the choleric reacts immediately. The choleric is usually the guy that walks around with his podium and sets it up and begins to preach to everyone because he has a strong, really strong sense of justice. And when he has a disordered self-love, everyone who doesn't have the same love that he has for himself is therefore unjust. And so they receive from him a massive amount of rancor and anger because they're not following in line.
That undue self-love in the form of a choleric looks like a finger wagger.
It does.
Somebody who just walks around wagging a finger.
Yep.
And we all know them. We love. I mean, first of all, my father shares in the community of cholerics as you do, as well as a lot of my friends actually in the clergy.
That's true.
I'm surrounded by cholerics.
You are concerned. Well, we have a few notable exceptions, but cholerics get things done, but they can also create a lot of damage. And so while
they tend to be good teachers.
They tend to be good teachers, but they can, the image I have for myself, and one of the things that I've attempted to work on, is that it's true. I can plow through a field and get to the end of whatever needs to happen. But then I look back and I see all these sort of damaged fields that I went through. There's a lot of collateral damage oftentimes to the choleric. He gets to the end that he's seeking, but other people and persons, and certainly their feelings, are oftentimes just collateral damage.
So, all right. So since we've entered into the realm of the medieval temperaments, so when you look at a sanguine person, they're very unlikely to be unpleasant.
No,
they're just not going to be that way. I mean, that's not how they're disposed. Then, if we were to look at the phlegmatic, now the phlegmatic could be unpleasant if they don't want to be bothered. Right, so if they usually roll with a punch as well, but if you force them to have to manage something that they find bothersome, that would be an irritant that could be.
Yeah, it's probably not in the way you're using unpleasant. You probably ran into a choleric, right? It's unpleasant insofar as the person manifests their certain indifference to something that you're excited about or something. But it's not unpleasant in that sort of abrasive, like, I can't, what energy am I picking up on here?
Right. Well, I guess the bottom line is that there are different temperaments, and different temperaments are going to suffer from the temptation to project unpleasantness more than others, right?
Yes, to be sure.
Fair enough.
I think the choleric is certainly the most unpleasant ever.
If they don't keep it in check. Although I do keep my father in check very well,
Well, let's go ahead and then sort of define what we mean by unpleasantness, because there's a certain amount of desire that is natural and good to want to be pleasing to someone, right? I mean, everyone enjoys the fact that when they're growing up, their parents put their coloring page up on the refrigerator, or you got a good job from a teacher or a coach, etc. We do look to the larger community to realize whether or not we are actually acting well. And so part of the response we get from other persons is just that, right? It's good that you exist, right? It's good that you have done well, if you have. And yet we're extending that sort of courtesy to persons that we don't know when we're just being pleasant. Maybe there's another aspect to this that you want to tease out relative to a sort of definition, but I think about the nature of the word grace itself, right? St. Thomas, when he talks about grace, says that giving a nominal definition, meaning a definition that just has to do with where the name was derived, it means to be in someone's favor, right? To be pleasing to someone, literally, right? So that when God looks at us, is he pleased with us? What's different than the way in which I might be pleased with you or you might be pleased with me. His look actually makes us pleasing. So it's the gift that makes the other person pleasing. And so it's a power, it's a capacity. But prescinding from that, the same sort of thing happens with us on a different level. It doesn't give us the power to be good, but it does help. Like when we encounter someone and they're affable and they smile at us, we are encouraged, literally, to be able to do something well. And I think that what we're getting at is when someone is unpleasant, they're saying to us immediately that we are not in their favor. And it feels as a diminishment of our own
It's a message.
being. It's a message.
It's a message.
That I don't want you, it's not good that you are here. It's not good that you exist.
Whether you intend it or not.
Whether you intend it or not.
There is something being communicated, and the message is being received. There's no doubt about it. You know, as you were talking, I had like 5 things go off, and now I got to like, did those cards just drop in my head?
Yeah. Because you, just to give you an example, I mean, you are sort of sanguine melancholic, which is the most impossible temperament to have together. But typically you are very pleasant with people. You don't easily get roused. And when you do, I know that it's something significant because it's just not your go-to. Whereas if you see me get roused, it's like, okay, Kauth will be over it in 30 seconds. Let's hope he doesn't blow something up in the meantime. But it's so
true.
So you feel
I go 180 degrees out of character.
Yeah.
If I get roused, and it can be striking. It certainly can be striking because it's not my normal.
Yeah.
People don't expect it, and I try to keep that in mind. But I think that people interacting with other people out there on the road, or in the grocery store, or at work, or in their neighborhoods, if we were a bit more conscientious about the messages that we're sending relative to being pleasant or unpleasant. I mean, it's one thing to be pensive and not engaged.
Sure.
You're just, everyone knows you're just somewhere else. But when we are entering into situations that are interacting with others, I think we should be a bit more conscientious about just being pleasant enough.
Yes.
As affording a certain respect to the other. I remember hearing a story when I was in grad school. I had a TA. I was a TA, and I had some students who tell me about a trip they made up to New York City. And they were Southern.
New York is unpleasant by.
This goes back to the social conditioning of defining what's pleasant and unpleasant. So they go up to New York City, and they were Southern with a Southern accent and a Southern style. And I must say that in the South, there is among that Southern hospitality, a regard for pleasantness. But of course, you can run into people who don't have Southern hospitality. But for those
because they're here from New York.
For those who do have that marvelous tradition of Southern hospitality, well, they went up and drove up to New York City to go see a concert. And as they approached one of the tolls at the base of the bridge, which, by the way, is always chaos, they proceeded to ask the toll man,
big mistake, how
to get to the concert center, which I think was at the Garden, something Garden, whatever that thing is. And the guy looked at them like they had 18 heads. And he said to them, I kid you not, what do I look like? Beep, 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 tour guide. And they were stunned. And of course, they moved right through.
Right.
And when they came back and told me the story, I started laughing. I said, of course. I mean, I would have expected, quite honestly, nothing less than that reaction.
Yes.
I said, because you don't understand the social condition there. You're being rude by holding everyone else behind you up, and you're asking this guy to give you directions when it's not the right time or place, and it's a complete disruption in the system. And in New York, you don't disrupt the system. Now, the colorful response was, I think, undue, a certain New York grit and charm, I suppose. But
it's like going to the zoo and seeing animals.
Yeah. But that said, that kind of reminded me when you were saying something about the cultural conditioning of what's considered to be pleasant or unpleasant. There are different circumstances and there are different cultures where they're going to project different values. And one of them in New York certainly is, don't interrupt me. Like, don't impede my flow. Like if you're, just standing when everyone is walking in this pathway and everyone knows you walk in this pathway and you're standing there because you don't know that, they're going to feel like you're offending them, and they will meet your what they regard as unpleasantness, and reply in an unpleasant way, like with colorful language.
Right.
Like, get the heck out of my way.
Well, you used a term, as you know, we work in seminary formation, and you used a term once with the men that is kind of stuck, and that is social lubrication, which I think is a great term, because not in every situation do you need to get down into the depths of someone's soul, right? When you're meeting people and you're going through the checkout line, etc., and they say to you obligatorily, did you find everything you need? It's really not the time to say, as a matter of fact, no, and go through that right there.
Or that's none of your
business. Or that's none of your business. or when they say, are you having a good day? Or hello, how are you? It's true that we don't expect an answer from those things. But sometimes I actually get one. If you attempt to have just a moment of encounter with someone to say, you're not a cog, and I'm going to treat you as a person, and you just remind yourself of that before you get into an encounter, and they may not respond, but I have had more often than not, someone just sort of pauses and looks at me, and they'll just give me a real response. And I had one yesterday, which was very simple. It was like, how's your day going? And it was a checkout at the grocery store, and she just said, well, so far so good, but I have to say I just got on, and here's what I'm looking forward to later on. And it was a small thing.
Right.
And then we got into a couple more sentences worth of text and context about our days, whatever else, and then we moved on. A small thing, but it was an actual encounter that was pleasant, that was good, that made her life not be mechanical. And especially now that we're taking over as many jobs as we can with machines as opposed to persons, to make them have an encounter, I think, is a fantastic thing. Of course, it's different for me too as a priest, right? Because I'm dressed in a collar.
It's a little more
people
inviting.
Expect it. It's inviting.
Of a reaction of any sort.
You don't want to be creepy.
Yeah. You get a reaction.
But I find those little vignettes and moments in life to be making something that I have to do that's a seriously menial, silly task of getting the groceries again. I find it to be life. That's part of life and encountering people.
And it matters.
As C.S. Lewis once said, you never meet an ordinary person. It's one of those great quotes that he has. You meet someone whose eternal destiny is such that should you see them in their glorified state, you'd be tempted to worship them. Or you see someone who will be an everlasting horror. And whatever you do in that moment encounter that you'll probably never have again with that person, that's the only time you get to see that person in your entire existence on this earth. To which end did you assist them?
It's a good way to put it. So let's recap.
I had that last part for Lewis. So
okay,
he didn't say the last part. I was glossing.
Well, I affirm you in your gloss. So let's recap. One, we both agree that people have a certain obligation, if not out of justice, but at least in charity, to project some respect for the dignity of others in what we're calling a modicum of pleasantness in interaction. We're both agreeing that should you walk into someone else's unpleasantness, that we would recommend not matching it or exceeding it. I mean, obviously exceeding it, you enter into the realm of a sin against justice. It's an undue, it's an undue response. Even trying to match it, though, usually just escalates. You don't really ever just match and stay there.
Right.
You escalate.
Yeah.
And now I think it leads people down a bad path. I've been there. You've been there. We've all been there.
Oh, I'm the DEFCON 5 guy.
So my general advice is to try to come in with an underreaction. So in a certain sense, I think it'll put them off their footing.
Sure.
Take them off their unpleasantness for a moment, because I would imagine that most of their responses are going to be met with unpleasantness, right, or doubling down and coming back harder.
Absolutely. One of the sort of images I use with the guys is a very simple one, but it helps me, which is that every time I encounter someone, right, they're on their own little emotional roller coaster. Now, some people don't have super highs and lows and twisty corkscrew roller coasters, but some do. Mm-hmm. And my only point is that I have not bought a ticket to ride your roller coaster.
Mm-hmm,
right? So I'm happy to engage you, happy to be pleasant, but I'm not getting on the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
They kind of want to get you in there. That's why you escalate.
Exactly. It draws you in. And so that I think we would all admit that we can have bad days. And be...
Well, you can. I mean, since I'm choleric, I can't believe that.
When you encounter somebody being unpleasant, maybe give them a little extra space, because if you're not having a bad day, I guess it's really tough when both of you are having a bad day. But if the person is having just assume they may be having a bad day. You have no idea what's going on in their life. You have no idea what's going on. So that underreaction, or even more charitable reaction in reply, might be warranted out of charity for the other person. So that can help. I guess taking that view of it might help you not to match in kind the negativity that's coming at you, right? By just saying, okay, maybe you're having a bad day, or maybe a lot of people have foisted on them a lot of negativity. And then I would say that we both agree that there are general dispositions that can lend themselves more toward unpleasantness than others. And those people who have those dispositions, like a choleric, have to be a little bit more careful.
I'm kind of wondering during this entire discussion, since we never prepare anything, I'm really wondering whether or not he encountered me and just changed the pronoun to she.
Well, you won't know, will you? We have a way of disguising
No, but
stories.
I mean, even getting back to the very first moment of this discussion, coming full circle, we were talking about looking at things, right? Pausing for a minute and looking at life, bringing to bear faith in our life with God on particulars. And this is another example. You just mentioned that maybe this person is going through X, Y, or Z, or maybe stepping back and not escalating, not matching, but coming under. But to do that, you can't react like an animal. You can't have a match pitch with the person across from you in a sort of reflexive manner. You have to be, on the contrary, reflective, and stop and say, all right, I'm going to volitionally react as opposed to just simply emotionally react. And that's an entirely different thing that requires an interior life.
So you can see, for example, what we did is we took an ordinary situation, ordinary circumstances, we brought to bear philosophical, theological, even interesting medieval thoughts. And we picked it apart, we dissected it a bit, and we kind of walked away, I think, having had this conversation, because it helps me to keep in the fore of my mind when I'm walking into somebody else's bad weather, for lack of a better expression, to have a bit of a strategy going into it.
Amen. That's so true.
All right, so before we go, your first one.
All right, so here's the deal.
Okay.
I had no idea. One of the things I love about living in Italy is that they don't really believe in eating any kind of food at any given time. Okay. Right? They're still very much tied to the seasons and things that come about in that particular season. So I was learning about growing garlic recently, and a friend of mine was sort of showing me the wonders of growing garlic. But there's a 2-week period in which something comes out of a garlic called a scape. You ever heard of it? It's fantastic. It's a
How does it come out?
So the garlic comes out
like an onion when those little things
just like an onion, right? So you have these massive leaves that come out of the bulb that's in the ground, as you would in any vegetable like that. And for 2 weeks, you have this central tendril that comes out of the middle. It's cylindrical, and it's got this little bulbous top on it, and then it begins to curl around. And I would have thought this thing was just an odd-looking appendage. But you pull those off, and you make a pesto out of it, and it's unbelievable.
No.
You don't add a stitch of garlic because, of course, it's growing out of the bulb.
Right.
And it just looks.
So you kind of use it like a chive.
It looks like a chive.
Yeah.
But you mash it up as you would any pesto, but you don't add garlic. You simply add your normal things. It is unbelievable.
How long does it take to get long enough ones, and how many?
The whole process lasts 2 weeks. Right? It comes out like wildfire.
Kind of like the onion.
Yeah, and then when it's gone, when it's done past its prime, it begins to sort of uncurl and shrivel up and get crinkly, and you can't use it anymore.
So you have to use it when it's still fresh.
You only get 2 weeks you can do this.
No, wait.
You make your pesto.
So, but you
it
can't.
is unbelievable.
You can't buy the.
You can't buy escapes.
But you can't buy the head of garlic and bring it home and let it sprout.
But you can. So this is honestly, I have about 50 heads of garlic now that are
trying to sprout
in my bed. But all you do to grow garlic is
you mean your garden bed.
Garden bed. I'm very fastidious, so it definitely wouldn't be my bed. But you just take one I forget the name of it. What do you call that little garlic? A clove. You take a clove and you put it in the ground. That's it. And that will produce a new head. That's your entire process of growing garlic. It's so easy that even I can do it, but it's a lot of fun.
But no, wait. So it's the part that comes out of the ground that you use, or are you saying you just let it sit in your kitchen and let the thing sprout like an onion?
No. You plant it, right? About 6
inches,
about 6
and then
inches
it will
down,
grow that,
and it will grow the normal foliage that comes out as it would.
And that's the stuff you're using.
Nope.
No.
That foliage is up there for a long time, and you have to keep watching because out of the center of that foliage will sprout just one cylindrical tendril. Just one.
Just one.
And you harvest that. So if you got 50 heads of garlic, you're going to get 50 scapes.
Wow. How many does it take for one of these?
It depends on how much you want to make, but I mean, I had enough for I would say sufficient amounts of pesto out of that to make probably about 6 pounds of pasta.
How many scapes?
50.
You had 50 scapes.
I probably had about 42. Yeah, I let some others grow, and then I was too late to get them afterwards. They already.
Did you save some for me?
I did.
Nice.
I have some.
Fantastic. All right. Fantastic. All right. So before we go, I got a text the other day from my sister. So my sister and her family, they live up in Washington,
D.C.
that's
a shout out right there.
Yep. So they live up in Washington, D.C. So her husband was working, but she took the kids to the Nationals game. And so my nephew, who I can barely believe is 14 years old, was at the game, and they panned the big camera over in the direction where they were seated. Well, somehow or another, they brought over him a Coke and a hat as a way to recognize him all on this big Jumbotron. And so he proceeds to smile and ham it up with the camera. He drinks some of his soda and then pours it over his head. So now this thing has been tweeted out by the Nationals team and is on their Instagram page, and the whole thing is going. And there's like 80 to 90 or 100 comments on it already. There's like nearly 20,000 views. It's hysterical. And as my sister said, I have no idea why he thought to pour the soda over his head.
I think I know the reason. You said that he's 14?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't develop reason as men for.
But look at me, he's hysterical. He's all smiles. He's
great.
wearing his Nats jersey. He's got his hat they just gave him, and the Coke they just gave him, and then he proceeds to pour up his. Now, if it were my nieces, his younger sisters, all they'd have to do to get the same reaction and probably twice the amount of views would be just to smile into the camera.
That's true.
Because they're adorable. Maybe that's the lesson here. The young boy, he has to make a fool of himself, where the young girl, all she has to do is give it a little twinkle and a smile, and the whole world melts.
And you melt. Uncle melts.
Absolutely.
Well, God bless you all. Have a great week. Great talking with you. Take care.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From the Rooftop with Msgr Patrick Winslow and Father Matthew Kauth on the Carolina Catholic Media Network. For more information about this or any of our programs, visit carolinacatholicmedia.org.
2022 is bringing many new and exciting changes to our Carolina Catholic Apostolate, built to communicate how to better learn, love, and live our Catholic faith. We begin with our name change to Carolina Catholic Media. This reflects the expanded scope of Carolina Catholic Radio to include the development of our podcast, streaming, social media, YouTube, and direct marketing platforms. 2022 is a very important year for the Catholic Church. As a result, Carolina Catholic Media will feature more local news, information, and conversation to reflect what's happening now and how it impacts our local Catholic community. Throughout the year, Carolina Catholic Media will showcase our Catholic schools and homeschools, the Charlotte Diocese 50th anniversary, and the 2-year worldwide synod process that begins on the diocesan level. We encourage you to get involved, join us, and catch the spirit. The Carolina Catholic Media Apostolate is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are 100% funded by you. Please consider a donation, monthly tithe, or business sponsorship to support our mission and vision to spread the truth of Jesus Christ and our Catholic faith across the Carolinas. Thank you for discerning a role in our apostolate. May God bless you.